Whether you're just starting out or scaling your security program, building trust and demonstrating strong security practices is more important than ever. Banter automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2 and more, saving you time, money and effort while strengthening customer trust. Plus, with automated security questionnaires and a customer-facing trust center, you can streamline security reviews and showcase your IT infrastructure security. Over 9,000 global companies, including Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora, already trust Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Get an exclusive $1,000 discount now at vanta.com/startupradio.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast, YouTube blog, and internet radio station from the DACH region. Today I do have somebody not necessarily from the DACH region, but a neighboring country. From time to time, we sneak into other startup scenes around Germany. And this time I would like to welcome Annick from Belgium. You are by training a marine biologist turned biotech investor. You were employee number 3 at EIT Food, built the Rising Food Stars network, and now you lead Biotech, a top European biotech startup hub, according to Financial Times. Annick, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I'm very confident there was a lot I've forgotten. Can you do a little bit intro by yourself?
Yes, I can. But to be honest, if I need to introduce myself, I always start, I'm a derailed marine biologist. So I think that's fully correct. I moved from science to business already in my PhD. I did my PhD with Biotech, which is a company everybody knows, of course. And that for me was the first sparkling, like, let's do something different than just science for the science. And that's how I, from opportunity to opportunity, always through trying to follow what I think matters most, run from science all the way into investment now.
Funny thing, you know what BASF stands for? BASF?
No, I don't. I used to, but I don't know anymore.
For everybody who wants to train German, it's Badische Anilin- und Sodafabrik. Okay. Exactly. There you go. Okay. I personally do understand what's fascinating about marine biology. What did actually bring you to study marine biology? What were your great plans to take over the world when you started? And how did you become biotech investor?
Yes, yeah, thanks for that. As a marine biologist, I'm not this mermaid diving with dolphins or whales or whatever.
You just ruined my picture.
But I did a PhD in a factory of BASF, where I was working with water treatment, and the fact that they were struggling with a marine species clogging their cool water system made me a marine biologist. It's as simple as that. And as a side remark, I had my first diving experience now only in December. So I'm that far off of marine biology. So taking over the world in preservation nature was never really high on my priority list. I think I'm, like many, started the PhD because I like student life. And it's like the easy, comfortable transition, at least for me it was, towards professional life. However, being in that environment and then having this connection with corporate showed me like there's something much more interesting than science. I don't know if you know, Joe, but at a lot of these scientific events, you get on stage, you tell something very scientific that nobody really understands or is interested in because it's only part of a huge puzzle, and then you get off the stage again. And that for me was not fulfilling enough to really make a difference and change the world to a certain extent. So I finished my PhD. I became a company advisor and worked with entrepreneurs, with scale-ups, with corporates, and also with these PhDs and postdoc where I felt there was something entrepreneurial, but nobody brought it up. So that's how I very organically, from a PhD, went through a collaboration with corporates, partly entrepreneurship, all the way up to EIT Food, where I really joined in a very early phase, as you mentioned, because that was the ecosystem to change the food system.
When you've been talking about staying a little bit more in the student life, I was wondering, was academia, like becoming a professor, spending your whole life in there, was that tempting from some dimension, except for getting there, doing a presentation and getting off the podest again?
Yeah, no, not really. I think a lot of PhDs and postdoc will align with me that as a scientist, it's quite lonely. Running a whole PhD is not the most dynamic environment to work with, even in academia life. So I never had the ambition. I was also definitely not that good to have an academic career. And that's why in an early phase, I started to look more into this applied world where you could do something that could add value on the short term. I've never been this long term impact person in the beginning.
Tell us a little bit about EIT Food and Rising Food Stars, because when I think about food and food startups, what comes to mind are those energy bars, those hangover shots. But I do believe there's much more to that. And interestingly, I think very few people will ever in their life get the experience of building up a EIT program. What was like the biggest challenge to be in there and building up Rising Food Stars?
Yeah, to be honest, it was an amazing journey there. When I was hired, because as an employee, I think I was one of the first few who really did an interview. And one person of the leadership team then said, "Yeah, Annick, you sparkled the interest because you were talking about working with startups and not for startups." So for me, being part of a small Belgian ecosystem, having the possibility to do something on a European level for startups was like, oh, we can do something. The idea of EIT Food and of every EIT community is to take a problem and try to solve it with a whole community. And specifically in the early phase, this small team was so intrinsically motivated to make a change. So that was great. I think my network exploded at that moment in time, and I still work a lot with these people on a daily/weekly basis. The biggest challenge, though, Joe, was the aim of every EIT community, as you have a lot of big corporates, a lot of big universities who want to sparkle innovation. And everybody knows that these are these slowly moving ships, and change things in a short period of time is not their cup of tea. So bringing startups to the equation, in theory, was a nice thing because they could make things move faster. They could sparkle this entrepreneurial drive within bigger entities. However, EIT communities in general also come with big projects and let's collaborate all together. And then you see that a startup, specifically those very small ones in the beginning, where there's the leadership of 3, maybe 1 or 2 FTEs, they're not fit for purpose to work in these bigger innovation projects to drive a change. So that for me was the biggest challenge, like 2 different speeds and aligning these 2 different entities. I always use the David versus Goliath term to align them in a way forward on the short term.
Mm-hmm. And where did Rising Food Stars come in? What was this a project you came up with? Was this something you assigned, or was this something you pitched there?
Yeah, it was something that I was assigned for. So the aim was, let's bring these startups into this big ecosystem. And the basic pieces of the puzzle were already there. There was already a scouting done, like these might be interesting companies to work with. And the theory for me is like, pick them up, build them into a network and see what comes out of it. However, the fact that indeed there were some challenges with the startups, over time, we changed it into a scale-up community. These companies are way better fit for purpose, also because of the fact, and you mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, Joe, we were looking for startups making a shift into the food ecosystem. And that was not going to be the next energy bar of the smoothie that was coming out of fermented ingredients. So we were really looking for companies who had a technology which had a way broader application focus. And that's why scale-ups who already had that, who know what it was to go from a company of 2 or 3 people to 5 or 10, were a better fit for the EIT community. And that's how the EIT Rising Food Stars Network went from a startup network to now more a scale-up network. And now EIT Food, there are more than 200 FTEs. The network is huge. So I think now they cover every part of the entrepreneurial challenge.
And from Rising Food Stars, you went to create Biotech.
Yes.
What is the problem you are solving, you're aiming to solve when launching Biotech?
For me, I always make it very plastic so people can see it. Early stage startup, and mainly startups working with a technology where a lot of money is needed, they are in this eternal circle and they keep on whirling around it. And let me explain, Joe, what it means is you have a startup on one side, you have interesting parties, whether it's corporates or investors on the other side, and they do not speak the same language. The startup, they have something, it's small, it itches like, ooh, there might be something in there. But the party on the other side always need to say, my God, this seems amazing, but please come back when you de-risk a little bit. You have a bigger volume. You can show that you have some customer traction. And the startups who got excited, like, yes, there's appetite on the other side. They needed to say, great, but please give me the money and I will be able to deliver. But the big parties always say, yeah, but first deliver and then you get the money. And there were a lot of companies who could not really get out of that. And that's why with Biotech, we decided, let's see if we can build something small to really push them out of that circle and to give them the means, not only financial, but the means to be able to deliver what the real investors, as we call them, and the corporates are looking for. And that was the aim. That was the challenge that we were trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. I was also wondering, what was the biggest hurdle setting up this incubator? Because it's backed by VIB, like the Flemish Institute for Biotechnology.
Yeah, but there were hurdles. There were also a lot of opportunities. But so VIB is the leading life science institute here in Belgium. What the institute is really good at is spinning out our own IP, meaning that we do not spin out a huge amount of companies. We support and grow them internally for a very long time. And by the time we spin them out, they do it with a seed round of 3 to 5 million. We also do the big part in human health. So there it's more 20, 30 million. And then these companies really have the fuel to grow. The opportunity here, to first look at the bright side, is that by having this as a success mechanism, it was very easy with the leadership team here to explain them how that model, by making it a little bit more scalable, would also fit IP from outside of our institute. So that was the convincing of how we could do this. Also, definitely an advantage was the fact that as an institute, we're so used of de-risking very, very early stage companies. Also, that was something that was quite easy, which is not always the case if you want to deploy money in early stage companies. The biggest hurdle for me was that although VIB as an institute is really well known in human health, it's way less known in ag and food, and to expand that planetary health, which is now our focus. And building the brand and trying to convince startups as well as later on investors that we can and we do play a huge role in this de-risking phase. I think that was the last year's definitely the biggest hurdle.
You talked about planetary health. Can you give us a definition for that? What you're looking,
Yes.
what you're aiming for?
Yeah. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, and but I like the impact. The story is you develop something that will make the planet better, or to at least to diminish the pressure on it a bit. But that entails a lot. So for us, biotech always stays the key thing. There needs to be a biotechnological challenge still. But while originally that we were looking for biotech innovations in agri and food, we now also expanded to more sustainable materials, improving health of the soil, of water, much broader ecosystems, also more digital solutions, and even to a certain extent some hardware, but everything that has a positive impact on the planet. The human as an extra thing, but we're not focusing on the human health.
What was the defining moment when you knew Biotope would be a success?
I'm still waiting for that moment, Joe. I don't know if there's ever a moment that you can say, yes, now it's a success. Because since we only really started in 2022, which is not that long ago. And it means that, and our portfolio companies are aware of that, we are a startup amongst startups. That's also the way we like to work. I think by struggling ourselves, by building a product people are willing to pay for, as startups are willing to work with us and take the investment with it. The fact that we are also raising a fund shows that we feel a little bit the same pains that they have. So that's a principle I like. However, every time one of our portfolio companies jumps into a next phase, whether it's a successful fundraising, hiring extra FTEs, being successful in grant applications, that's for me the success. That's for me showing with a few data points this works.
Mm-hmm. And as you've been saying, to de-risk the very, very early phases of startups, right?
Yes.
I see. We will be back after a short ad break with talking about scaling and leadership.
Elevate your digital audio advertising with AdsWiz's solutions. Our suite of advertiser tools allows for personalized and impactful campaigns that reach your target audiences through innovative and engaging channels. From global agencies to trading desks and exchanges, AdsWiz takes your brand awareness and performance marketing goals to the next level. Take your digital audio advertising to the next level today.
Hey guys, welcome back to my interview with Annick from Biotope from Belgium. We've been talking about how she has been a part of EIT Food and building up rising food stars, and now she's with Biotope, and that's what we're talking about, an incubator for biotech startups. Wait, where are you physically located?
I am physically located in Belgium, in Ghent.
Ghent, not Brussels.
Not Brussels. No.
Not Brussels. I see. You know, what always comes to mind in Brussels is chocolate and beer.
Of course, that should be a general thing when you come to Belgium. Chocolate, beer, and French fries.
Yes, they were invented there. But I have to tell you, my last visit is already some time ago, but it wasn't the best experience that I ever had. I caught Corona.
Oh, no. In Belgium. In Brussels.
Yeah. It happened. I think at the time it could have happened all over the world. So
yes, no, I agree.
Yes. Talking about a little bit navigating the biotech startup landscape. Biotech startups often face regulatory and IP challenges. How do you help founders to overcome them? Because I do understand you need for a lot of that, a lot of smart people, lawyers, tax advisors, professionals and regulations. So that's also very expensive to have on hand as a startup, right?
Yeah, I was going to say you also need a lot of money and unfortunately a lot of time. So I fully align there. But as you say, I think it's a crucial part of the puzzle that I would not say that biotech startups tend to forget it. They tend to think that it will work out fine in the end. And if you do not have a strategy behind it, it will not. I think that's very black and white, but that's the story. Yes. But I think what how we work, Joe, is we bring pre-seed companies to seed stage, meaning that by the time they raise a seed round, there can still be a lot of question marks. They don't need to have a full novel food regulation, fully paid out to maybe have an agreement on a component that will not be their end product, just stating something. So what we do is we support the startups in understanding why IP is important, to understand how to do the basic IP parts themselves. How do you search? How do you check competition and where they file their IP? What are different databases to use? And we do the same with regulatory. Do you understand how EFSA is different than FDA in the US? What does it mean for the different countries? So this is a part of the learning. And then they get support by legal advisors, by regulatory experts, to together develop a long-term strategy on IP and on regulatory. And that's how we really hands-on support them. Help them with the first filing, help them with mapping out what could be the different roadmaps, IP-wise and regulatory-wise, but really focus on this long-term strategy mindset.
I was pretty curious how you are selecting to back the right founders to back, because very simply spoken, a lot of people emphasize a lot of the business plan, but I haven't met a startup where the first business plan was the reality of the successful startup. So most people say personality of the founder. What is your take on that?
Yeah. I think when I started this, I still thought that people was exaggerated. It is people. But I think what is for us important is that it should be more than that. So when it comes to how do we identify the right people to back, is very often as an early stage investor, you do your due diligence. On paper, you have a few calls, and then there's a selection. We built a specific process whereby we do a first selection based on the science and the IP. How tangible is it? Not about the business model, as you can say. You can mold a lot around that, but really on the science and the IP. And then the ones that stand out at this part are being invited to a base camp. And a base camp for us is a 3-week program, 1 week in person, to understand what is the baseline of the company. There's a reason why we call it the base camp and not the boot camp. It's really about where are you now and where do you want to go. And this first week is an in-person week. And that is for us the key thing to learn, to understand who the people are who drive the company. So yes, people, but we also look at the science and the IP.
Mm-hmm. People, science, IP. Okay,
yes.
Understood. That makes an algorithm. Okay.
Super.
How do you balance this innovation and the risk when you evaluate those companies? Because they can either work spectacularly well or go bankrupt very fast, because when they don't have the right balance there. When you've been talking about how you help those founders to prepare, look at the right databases, how to search, I imagine them sitting in front of 3 screens with a lot of coffee mugs all around and looking. I think that's not too far from reality,
no, it's
isn't
definitely
it?
not too far off. And
Wow.
A lot of these sessions, by the way, we also try to do in-house here so that they see from each other that we're not the only ones struggling with a lot of coffee, trying to understand and how to navigate these things. Balancing innovation and risk in the pre-seed phase is a very delicate balance. I think if we need to put a bet on that in such an early phase, innovation always comes first and risk always comes second. So if the innovative potential is huge and we see a business appetite, then we will just take the risk. But we will never go for a risk-averse decision almost when it's a low-hanging fruit that cannot make impact. So for us, innovation is key. And the risk, we try to mitigate as much as possible by working with them and trying to tackle that as good as possible.
I see. Let us now, after we know a little bit how your algorithm works to select startups, let's talk a little bit what you already learned from scaling those startups. What do you wish more biotech founders understood before they seek their first investment?
Yeah, there's a few. How many can I select? I think the first one, perfect. I think the first one, as we mentioned, Joe, a lot of biotech founders love their technology very often. And one of the first lessons that we learn them is stop loving your technology, but start loving the problem that you can solve and that people are willing to pay for. Together with that comes the fact that sometimes if I look in my surrounding and a lot of the startups that we support, whether we invest in them, yes or no, they tend to forget that we are in a people business. We mentioned people from the team part, but also your clients, your investors, they're also people. And this overarching focus on the tech should also disappear there. So that's number two. And then the third one, I think that's one that we learned by doing, is operational excellence. We still see a lot of startups who focus on this long term, at this big, hairy, audacious goal that everybody's talking about. And of course, there you are ambitious, right? You cannot change the world if you look at these marginal innovations that you want to do. But really showcasing and on working on what you have in your hands in an early phase and have this operationally nicely laid out so that indeed you make progress towards that goal instead of only selling that. That is something that would be great if more early biotech founders would understand that and implement that already in a very early phase.
Can you share with us like one example, one case study of a biotech startup Biotope helped to grow?
Yes, I can. It's still very early, because together with the investment comes a support of 18 months. And the fact that we only made our first investment not only 3 years ago makes my data points. And I think that's part of our language, right? Having enough data points makes them limited. But of course, there are always startups that we are very proud of and that we think make progress. I can make the example of Zymofix. Zymofix is, by the way, a company that got investment from High Tech Gründer Fund. So there is a link with Germany. And they scale up the production of beneficial microorganisms for agricultural applications. They do it through biomass fermentation. So this is a company. It was not even a company, by the way, when they joined Biotope. It was Emil, the CEO of the company, joined together with a financial profile that he worked together with. They joined our base camp with an idea coming out of an SME that already existed. And they said, you know what, we can use any waste, manure in this case, which is a huge problem in Belgium, but not only in Belgium. And we can turn this manure into something sterile that can have added value for agriculture. So as I mentioned, they came in, not even a legal entity yet, 1.2 FTEs, white male young guys, which does not align also with the diversity angle that we are focusing on. But now in this less than 2 years, they managed to grow their team from 2 to 14. They raised a successful seed round with some really impressive family offices. They were successful in the EIC accelerator, and they had this, I think maybe they were a little bit even the other way around than what I mentioned before. They were operationally amazingly excellent, but maybe their ambition was not ambitious enough. And now they have grown in that. So I think for me, that's a great case study, how this company, not only by investment, but also by grants, can grow over time in a very rapid pace and hopefully can make a significant impact.
I see. I was when you talked about like your diversity goals, can you tell us how diverse your current cohort is?
Yes, I can. With pride, by the way, because 85% of our portfolio companies have a mixed founding team.
That is good. We've been coming back a little bit to funding. Many founders struggle with raising the next funding round. Coming out of your program, you have the first funding round, and then usually there's a problem on the next funding round. What is your best advice for them?
Yeah. I think there, Joe, these days are worse than ever if you want to raise. I think a lot of companies will agree with me on that. And for me, there, the main advice is to be realistic in the timeline. Be realistic in understanding how long it takes, not to raise only, but to get money on your bank account. So we try to challenge our startups by, very often they said, we're going to open our seed round in May or in June, whatever. There's this time frame. And then if you ask them, but okay, when would you need money on your bank account to keep on going?
In
then
August.
Very often the answer is yes, August or even June or July itself. And for me, that's important. Be realistic on when you need money and then try to count backwards. And not say, I will open and everybody will be so enthusiastic that this will come by itself.
We've been talking about the diversity in biotech. You emphasize backing diverse founders. Why is this important in biotech?
For me, it's important everywhere. I think specifically in the early startup phase and maybe in tech a bit more than in some other fields, there is this balance, which is not how the world looks like, right? And I think for me, diversity is key to innovation. If you limit who can contribute to innovation, you will also limit the amount of solutions that will get out there. And for me, it's a given to have diversity, and that can be diversity in every aspect. So it's key. I think even if we see a full male or a full female team, one of the questions is, how are you going to solve that?
How do you see the biotech startup ecosystem evolving in the next 5 years?
Yeah, quite positive. It's not the easiest ecosystem to be part of, and I always admire these brave entrepreneurs who really want to put a technology into practice to improve what we have here. But the good thing is, at least in Europe, is that the European Commission has also acknowledged this. There's now this wanting to build the future with nature within the European Commission, and that will definitely boost biotechnology. I think there we do have an added value. On the other hand, the difficult financing climate, we already elaborated on it, that will again have an impact on the other side. So I'm still hopeful. I think it will grow, but it will stay a very difficult field for a startup to easily navigate and grow in, for sure.
I would like to ask you a few more very short questions because we're already running around 30 minutes of recording time. What is one biotech trend people are underestimating? Short answer.
Yeah. Biotech that can be of added value in restoring health.
What is the best piece of advice you ever received?
I think for me that was not to spend too much time out of my circle of influence. Stick at what I can impact.
Mm-hmm. If you weren't in biotech, what industry would you be in?
I would already have changed my studies. I think I would be a veterinarian. No industry at all, working with animals.
One founder trait that guarantees success?
Oh, listening, for sure. Listen instead of talking.
Like listeners to podcasts.
For example, but also really deep listen, Joe. I think you can acknowledge that. Not just listening where you're in the car and driving, really listening to what it means and how it can add value to you.
What is your go-to productivity hack?
At this moment, meeting-free day a week.
Mm-hmm. I actually also implemented this 2 days where only a very, very few people can book some meetings with me, and it helped me a lot. That's why you do all the stuff. You usually don't do administrivia, tax filings, and all that stuff. That's basically where I have this all connected. Yeah. I even get together in like an online hangout together with a friend, and we call it the hour of the skunk. It's when we do all the stuff nobody wants to do. Before we leave right now, final wise, what's the one key takeaway you want biotech and agri-food founders to remember?
For me, it's something that we hardly touched upon. It's, as a biotech founder, do not only focus on diluted funding, meaning investment, definitely also explore grants as undiluted one. The match of both are ideal, not one, not the other. Try to match them together in your ideal financial strategy.
Mm-hmm. Now a lot of people know you. Where can they learn more? Where can they follow you?
I think the easiest is LinkedIn. As well, myself, as Biotech by VIB, we're quite active on LinkedIn. So we have a website, but everything goes through a quite static thing. LinkedIn shows how we work as a dynamic team.
Annick, thank you very much. Everybody else, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Startuprad.io. We'll be back with more insight from top founders and investors. And Annick, somebody like you, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure being here, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.
Whether you're just starting out or scaling your security program, building trust and demonstrating strong security practices is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2 and more, saving you time, money and effort while strengthening customer trust. Plus, with automated security questionnaires and a customer-facing trust center, you can streamline security reviews and showcase your IT infrastructure security. Over 9,000 global companies, including Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora, already trust Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Get an exclusive $1,000 discount now at vanta.com/startupradio.